What is up, everybody? I got the weird screen thing going on. Hey, so this is a members only or members first video. I busted out my Landstar hat. This is pretty cool. It's got the rubber tread on it. It's pretty neat. It's a little bit sweat stained because I worked hard with it, but I wanted to go over why I failed at Landstar. And so if you guys are new to the channel, so here's the deal. So in 2014, I decided to buy a truck. I bought a 2009 Peterbilt 387. It was black. It was a cool truck. Wasn't the best performing truck. It steered like an aircraft carrier. It was horrible on fuel mileage. It had the Cummins ISX, but you know, it wasn't the best. It wasn't the worst, but it wasn't the best. It was a heavy truck. It was tough. It was tough to get it in tight areas. So it wasn't probably the best truck purchase, but it was what I could afford at the time. And at that time, someone was telling me about his buddy at Landstar and how much money they were making. And of course, as a company driver, you hear things like, "Oh, he's making $2 a mile," and I'm thinking, "Man, I'm making 40 cents a mile. What am I doing with my life?" Right? Not realizing that you're paying for everything, right? But numbers can be a little bit misleading. And then the other selling point was you can self dispatch. I'm like, oh, cool, man, my dispatcher sucks. I bet you I could do a much better job than him, right? So I decided to apply for my first truck. I got it from Aero Trucks here in Springfield, Missouri. And at the same time, I applied for Landstar, passed with flying colors, because of my record or whatever. And literally signed on with the new company and bought the truck at the same time. It's a little overwhelming. I didn't know what I was doing, but luckily I had a few people in my corner that helped me out. I was there for a year and a half. And at the time, I felt that I was doing okay up until about 6 months afterwards. I was starting to struggle. And at that time, we had hit a freight recession. This was back in 2014. So 2015 hit, and it was like someone hit a switch. There was the volumes went down, the rates were down, and I couldn't make ends meet. And that bothered me because I thought that was the only platform where you can choose, dispatch yourself, which I was bound to determine to only dispatch myself. So what I ended up, a friend of mine reached out to his friend Jeffrey Like over at Schneider, who was over at Schneider at the time, and we had some discussions. He did a video, Landstar versus Schneider. I had no idea Schneider had a choice program where you can self-dispatch. And at the time, I was really struggling with the agents, calling on loads and finding out that they don't even really have them. I really struggled with that. And so I didn't want to talk to agents anymore. So Schneider's click and go system was a no-brainer for me. And it had some of the stability of a bigger carrier, which is what I was used to in the first place. So in September, I put in an application of 2015, and I believe, or maybe it was, yeah, and then I started literally right at the start of 2016. And then the rest is history. I did a year over at Schneider, bought another truck, sold the Peterbilt, or traded in rather, and then I did another year at Schneider. And then when Jeffrey Like started his authority, I signed on with him, and I've been in the spot market ever since. And I remember a time, and we're going to bring up some YouTube drama stuff, okay? I remember a time when the Truckers Table and I were speaking on Zello. Zello is the biggest number one cause of YouTube drama in the YouTube trucker drama sphere. And sphere, not spear. And And he had mentioned he was upset, right? He was upset at something. So he did a video. And I always tell YouTubers, don't make a video when you're upset because you're going to say something you're going to regret that you can't take back. And he did a video where he said, Snorelord, I wish you were at Landstar when I was, so I could have helped you out. You know, he implied that I had failed. And I got mad. I got offended. And I got on Zello and chewed him out. He ended up taking the video down. He ended up apologizing that he was just stressed out because he's worried about his truck breaking down or whatever. And because I didn't see myself at that time as a failure, my attitude was like, no, Landstar failed me, right? And I thought about that, and the truckers table and we've made amends, since then. I went off on him on Zello like nobody's heard me do before, and but we threw it under the rug. He apologized, and I apologized, and it's all good now. And then nothing else really came of it. I don't think he likes it when I bash Landstar, which I don't really bash Landstar. I just don't put them in a positive light. And but the reality is the majority of the issues, because look, when you go to the convoy for the Special Olympics in Joplin, Missouri, the first 10 trucks are the ones that paid big money to be in that position in the convoy, and they're usually 9 times out of 10 they're Landstar trucks. There are people over at Landstar and they're making really good money. So I started thinking about, well, what did I do wrong? Maybe I need to take a dose of humility and figure out, okay, why didn't I make that work? Because what was interesting was when I was at Schneider, there were people on the yard that would stop me and like, hey man, I'm leaving the Big Orange. I'm going to Landstar. What are your thoughts on that? I said, well, I came here from Landstar, and they thought I was weird because, they were looking at the big money that was over there. And, meanwhile, I was making better money and steady money at Schneider. But so they thought I was weird that I would leave Landstar to go to Schneider when they're doing everything they can to go from Schneider to Landstar. The similarities that they're both self-dispatch, but that's where it ends. There's a little bit of drop and hook at Landstar, not as much as Schneider. But beyond that, there's really, there's a lot more freedom at Landstar. And, so if you want consistency and steadiness, then Schneider was the winner in my book in dry van. But if you wanted to do flatbed, specialized, better paying hazmat, the ability to work outside of the closed low board, Landstar was it. Landstar, you can find an agent that can look on the low boards for you. And as long as the broker that he's getting the load from can work with Landstar, then, or, doesn't have a co-brokering agreement, then he could book that for you. He or she can book that for you. So, so there's the differences. Jeffrey Like did a video explaining the differences between Landstar and Schneider was just a better fit for me. And so, but I've been thinking about, okay, why, with a lot of people struggling in the spot market right now, why are they struggling? And I realized that it mirrors the problems that I had at Landstar. And so I thought, you know what, this would be a great opportunity for my members to see me talk about my weaknesses. And so here they are. So I made a list, I made notes, and I want to share them with you. So here's the things that I did wrong when I was at Landstar. And this is why I struggled. So number one, I focused on the wrong things. I literally had no business mindset. I was only looking at the gross numbers. And so think about this. The first load I ever booked with Landstar was a load that went from Indianapolis to Bloomington, Illinois. And then Or no, it wasn't any. It was the chip place, Anderson, Indiana. Frito-Lay. I took that to Illinois, and then I grabbed Bloomington to Indy. But the first load paid $700. That Frito-Lay load paid $700 for 150 miles. I couldn't believe it. I thought, man, this is awesome. That's more money. That's almost as much money as I make in a week being a company driver. Oh my gosh. Not realizing that out of that 700, insurance, fuel, all the expenses. And so my first settlement at Landstar was negative $300 because I completely did not know what my expenses were at all. Now, with that being said, I focused on the rate per mile, not on the total revenue, not on the total net revenue. So at Landstar, you get 65%. So out of a $1,000 load, you get $650. If there's fuel surcharge added, then you get 100% of that. If there's accessorials, you get 100% of that. So doing that math, they actually handed you a card that give you the quick math. If your load's paying X amount per mile, this is your X amount per real per mile, after your percentage. But what they do on the demo to attract people to Landstar is they give you the gross numbers. Schneider, you got what you got. If that load paid $900, that's what you had. They've already taken their 35%. It was the same percentage at that time. I don't know what percentage Schneider's at now with that AIR low board. But what I found was, okay, so let's backtrack. So in orientation, which was done at Indy, two great guys. They were awesome. They were just extremely helpful. They were great people. In fact, I visited them quite a bit, hung out at the Indy yard all the time because Indy was a hotspot for freight for Landstar. It was easy to get out of there. They had, during orientation, they would go over what your cost per mile, what your gross cost per mile, what your net cost per mile. And so they try to put it in your head of, the business mindset, which, was good for me. But what you find out is most people don't know what their true costs are. And so we did this fill out sheet of, and then basically the sheet says, don't do anything below X amount per mile. And I think that mine was like $1.90 or something like that. And so I vowed when I looked at the low board, when I, looked at, because you could set it, don't show any loads below X amount per mile. I never set it below that amount per mile. I want to say it was $2. So I was only focused on the rate per mile. Because being a company driver, that's what you focus on. You focus on how many miles you drive in a day. How many miles you drive in a week. That's how you get paid, right? And then the other part of that was I focused on the loads that I wanted, not the loads that the truck needed. Again, because I didn't know my cost. So that first settlement was literally negative $300. And I thought, man, I've been busting my butt. I haven't had a paycheck in 3 weeks because of buying the truck and coming over here. And that was tough. I was like, what have I done? Right? And that still didn't ring any alarms with me, though. That's still just, I'm learning. I'll figure it out. And that comes to number two. Number two was I did not take into account the learning curve of, number one, working with a low board. Number two, self-dispatch. A lot of people think they can do it better than their dispatcher, but I'm here to tell you, you got to put your pride and ego aside, and you're going to have a dose of humility. because it's not so easy to dispatch yourself. Because not only are you trying to figure out where you need to go or where you want to go, but now you got to negotiate with these people. And if you don't research the lanes, if you don't have a sales mentality, it was a struggle. And I didn't. I'm not a salesperson. I'm not the guy that could, sell cars or anything like that. I've never been that person. I did phone sales once when I was 16. I literally lasted 2 hours. It was the longest 2 hours of my life, and then they ended up firing me the next day because I just didn't have it in me. The other thing I didn't, when it came to load boards, I did not research what a good market was. So I'd say, oh, look, here's a load to Dallas. I'll take that. And then I get to Dallas and go, holy crap, there's no loads coming out of here. Or, because I was only looking at stuff north of $2 a mile. And then I remember talking to another Landstar driver said, hey, put it at $1 a mile. Well, I ain't running for $1 a mile. No. You don't have to run for $1 a mile, but you're going to get the stuff that doesn't have a price on it, or they'll put $1, but knowing that you need to call them and tell them what rate you want. What's your minimum rate? Oh, according to orientation, my minimum rate is X amount. Okay. You're not going to get that coming out of Dallas. You're not going to get that coming out of El Paso. You're not going to get that coming out of Laredo. And so I would sit because I was waiting for that magic rate per mile. And finally it'd come, and it'd be in the form of a 200-mile run. And my overall weekly revenue wasn't great on weeks like that. Now, not every week was like that. There were weeks where I really did make a lot of money. In fact, there was 1 month that I ran straight, straight for the whole month. And I took that money and I cut up all the bills, and I paid off my pickup early. There wasn't much left, but it was nice to get that bill off the market, or off the roster or whatever. But I didn't research the market, so I'd end up in these dead end places, not realizing what the hell. Like, you go to Denver, the beer loads out of Denver were like $1.10, $1.20 a mile. Out of, for the beer loads, you might get $1.80 if it's a empty can load, but usually that's going to a dead area. And I remember this vividly. I took a load to Denver and then grabbed a empty can load that went to Las Cruces, New Mexico. You know how much freight is out in Las Cruces, New Mexico? 0. Especially in the Landstar system. At least on their low board. We'll get to that in a minute. I did not master the system because there was no rhyme or reason for my own system. So without doing the proper research and knowing that some lanes paid better than others, and I was picking the loads that I wanted to do, not the ones that the business needed, the low board became kind of a crap show. Now, they have a class called CABS class that you have to do after 180 days. And there's 2 parts to it. The first part is all the safety stuff, that you would get in most normal orientations. But then the second half was business. And what they did is they showed you how to manage your business. They would give you tips on managing the load board. And then you would learn that you have all these tools at your disposal. And you couldn't even, you didn't even know how to tap into them. And I remember being overwhelmed in orientation, but then like the CABS class was kind of a game changer for me. And I was, and half the people didn't even stay for that part because that part wasn't mandatory. The safety part was. And I figured out that I'm unorganized, and here I am. I have all these tools at my disposal, and I was trying to fix everything with a hammer and duct tape. That's my analogy for that. I was very unorganized. That was number 3. I was very unorganized. I didn't save receipts very well. I was that guy the first year with the shoebox of receipts. I was that guy. And that brings me to number 4. Well, going back to number 3, the part of the unorganization is I couldn't even tell you what all these deductions were on my settlement. You know, they have abbreviations. I think this is the insurance, and I think this is the occupational. I think this is the license plate. I'm not sure what this is. Oh, look at all these card fees. I mean, just a lot of money going out the door, and I didn't even know what it was. But it brings me to number 4. Number 4, I did not track my expenses or did any accounting whatsoever. I did not know what my actual profit was because what did I do? I judged the success of my business based off of my deposit slips. Man, this check is paying $3,000, man. Freaking awesome. And not realizing that, yeah, how are you how much you paying yourself, how much is going to taxes, how much is going to the truck. I didn't do any of that. I did not track any of that. Now, people told me to. There were people sending me links to videos of business, treating a trucking business like a business. There was plenty of YouTube back then. It's not the players that you see today, but there were some players back then that had sound advice. And this is boring. I'm going to do it my way. It was the old trucker me. I'm like, I'm going to do it my way. I don't need to track all that. That doesn't make me feel like a truck driver. I don't want to feel like a suit and tie and blah, 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 And that brings me to number 5. When I would get a fat check, when I would get the feast, you know what I did? I went home and I stayed home. I did not build off the momentum I would gain. In other words, I'd have 2 good weeks and then I'd have an okay week and then I'd go home. As soon as the deposits hit and it looked really good, I was, shoot, I'll take a week off. Be all right. And my wife would always ask me, are you sure you can afford to take a week off? Oh, yeah, we're fine. Because I didn't know any better. Not realizing that, hey, you're driving a truck that's got 600, 700,000 miles on it. That's going to catch up with you. And I've heard other drivers, including Landstar drivers, that tell me, "Oh man, I don't keep track of all that. That just stresses me out. I measure my success with the deposit slips. I don't keep notes for anything." Now, I did meet a Landstar driver that took notes on everything, and I started to do that. It inspired me to do that, right? And the YouTubers that I was watching, they weren't business minded. They weren't talking about doing your numbers or anything like that. And that's when I started this channel, was as a Landstar vlog. And I wish I would have kept those videos because I think that I'd be watching myself with disgust with the way that the things that I would talk about. And when the rates and momentum were good, I took more time off. I got this much in the bank, so we can take the rest of the week off or rest of the month off or whatever. And that was a mistake because what I needed to be doing was building up as much as possible when the rates were good, because 2015 hit and they crashed. They crashed hard. And part of the low board issue, going back to that real quick, is I didn't expand my radius. It was 100 miles or 150 if things were thin. And then once I remember a time where I did no minimum mile, and all of a sudden there's like 400 loads within a 150-mile radius of Dallas. I was in and out there a lot. And that's when I realized that I was doing this low board thing kind of all wrong. But still, I wasn't moving this truck for less than X amount per mile. So I would sit for a day or 2 days at the truck stop, eating Popeyes, being stressed out. getting fat. So, the other part of that, you know, I took too much time off because this is about my freedom. It's not about money. It's about freedom. Well, freedom's no good if your expenses are too high, if you're not bringing anything home. I did not, so it brings me to number 6. I did not run efficiently at all. I was afraid to book ahead. I remember there was one week where I booked 4 loads in a row, and I booked 4 loads in a row. Sorry, I'm going to mute this. And I would sit waiting, right? So, sorry, I got distracted. I should have muted the phones before I started this. But I did not run efficiently. Oh, yeah, so we're talking about the week, sorry. It's like a live feed, but it's not live. So, at Landstar, if you tick off an agent, they could easily put you on this list that other Landstar agents read. And if you're hard to work with, or if you cancel a lot of loads, it ruins your reputation there. Because for every load that you call, they're going to ask for your truck number. And once they ring that up, they know exactly how long you've been running. They know exactly what truck you have. They can tell how new you are based off your truck number. And there were some agents that want to take advantage of that. And so if you didn't want to cancel a load. So I took a big risk. I booked 4 loads in a row, and I had to be home for, I think our band was playing a gig. And one of the loads canceled in the middle of the week. And you know what I had to do? I had to just deadhead to the next load because I didn't want to cancel it. I was afraid of canceling loads. So I became really gun shy on booking ahead. And that became a problem because I would spend all day looking for one load. And then when I went to book the next load after that, it took like 10 minutes because I didn't understand the low board system that, this is not a book day of market. But yet I had all these other Landstar drivers tell me, hey man, you gotta do the 3 o'clock shuffle. You're going to get the best rates if you wait till the last minute. And that simply wasn't the case because when the market is bad, which it had turned bad and I didn't even realize it, that 3 o'clock shuffle disappears. The spot market's dealing with that right now. You might find that one load or pocket or that lucky break, but you can't run your entire business off of it. You got to book ahead. So it goes to my next one, number 7. I did not network correctly because I wanted my freedom, because I didn't want anybody telling me what to do or where to go. I did not see the value of calling an agent, becoming their friend, and having them become my dispatcher. That was kind of a big mistake for me. I didn't, there was a couple of agents that I networked with, but they never had the loads that I wanted. And so when they call you and say, I've got these 5 loads, do you want any of them? And you go, no. Well, they stop calling you after a while. And I didn't know how to find the brokers or the agents, I'm sorry, that had the direct freight. Those are the ones I should have friended, because what I learned very late in the game at Landstar was that the best loads don't hit the low board. They just don't. They got steady drivers that never fail, that run those loads to where they never have to post them. Because if you rely solely on the low board at Landstar as a drive-in guy, you're dealing with all the co-brokering. You're dealing with the agents that are getting their loads from like Sage Robinson or Coyote. So they're getting their cut. And so by the time you get a piece of the pie, after Landstar and Comdata and the agent, you get almost nothing. And it was very frustrating to make 20 phone calls to agents only to go, hey, I'll call you back in 15 minutes to see if this load's still available. And then they call you back, yeah, it's not available anymore. That happened over and over and over. But instead of figuring out why it was that way, I just blamed it on Landstar, and I had to leave the system. That's where the Schneider Click and Go was really appealing. And part of that not networking completely or correctly was I had horrible sales skills. I was not the easiest person to talk to on the phone, at least in my opinion. I like I said, I'm not a sales guy. I'm not the kind of guy that can sell ice to an Eskimo. I'm not that guy. And so this trucking thing, this owning a truck was more of a hobby than a business. And that's essentially what it was. And because I keep my costs low, or I thought I did, I had room for error. I could run the way I wanted, which wasn't very hard. It wasn't very well. It wasn't very efficient. So what did I learn from the experience? Well, number one, the first thing I did was I started doing my numbers after I was at Schneider for a little bit. If I had to go back to Landstar, I would run it completely different. I'd start at the low board, find the agents that had the most freight, and then talk to them and say, okay, keep me rolling. What's your best paying stuff? What stuff is direct? Which they have it on the low board, which stuff's direct and which one's not. And just stay in that groove. And if you knew the right agents, you could do the stuff like the NASCAR ESPN stuff, or you could do the tours. There's a lot of music tours that Landstar is a part of. That would have been really cool, but I need to be home every weekend, or I need to be home every other day. And at Landstar, that was a big challenge if you wanted to make real good money there. Now I did learn how to survive. I did learn survival tactics. Like one of the things I would do is I would do the hazmat, but empty totes. They were still hazmat, but they were light, so fuel efficiency was better, and they paid better than the standard flat rates that were going on at the time for van. The other thing I learned was shopping carts. Shopping carts became my MO. There's a factory in Wagner, Oklahoma that builds shopping carts for all the major retailers. And I would grab those loads. A lot of them were multi-stop. A lot of them would put me in bad areas, but they paid well. A little bit of a pain in the butt on some of the stores, but for the most part, I loved those loads. They weren't too heavy, and I went everywhere with those. What I tried to do is I tried to find the bad ones coming back to Wagner. If I could do that, hell, you'd call me the shopping cart guy. So that's what I learned. And so when I look at a lot of people in the spot market right now, they're making a lot of the same mistakes I made. And the only problem with that is that this market are going to chew those people up and spit them out. And so a lot of these things I could apply to the spot market. When I decided to go into the spot market, my wife and I talked about it, and all my biggest fears of the problems I had at Landstar, Jeff put at ease, because Jeff was at Landstar as well at one time, and he recognized my my reservations about it, and he assured me that this would be different, and for the most part it has, but I still had to figure a few things out, and these are the things that I learned. So that's why I did not, I guess you could say I didn't fail at Landstar because I learned from my experience. It's not like it put my truck, like I didn't get my truck repoed. I didn't lose my CDL. I didn't lose my house. I didn't even lose my business. I just pivoted, and the pivot worked. But these were the shortcomings that I had, and we're still learning. We're still learning. So I apologize. I have not done more member only videos, but that's going to change. I hope you guys enjoyed this. Give the thumbs up, and I appreciate you guys for supporting the channel. And we're going to do more of these kind of things. And you're going to see probably an additional side of me. I wouldn't say a different side, because I'm pretty upfront on the regular videos, but here I'm a little bit more in depth on some of my thoughts. So I hope you enjoyed this video. Thanks for your membership. Thanks for your support. I appreciate you guys. Strength for today, hope for tomorrow. Aggression turns the screw. Peace.